This is the Convict Australia podcast. Thank you for tuning in. It was a crisp autumn morning in May 1814. Port Jackson was bustling with activity. Along the water's edge, dock workers moved about with purpose, their weathered hands hauling crates from the ships. The sound of carpenters sawing wood echoed as they made repairs, while sails flapped restlessly in the breeze. Above it all, seagulls circled, squawking as they searched for scraps. Nestled among the other vessels sat the 3Bs, its tall masts swaying slightly with the rhythm of the harbour. Built the previous year, the 3Bs was a first-class ship of 459 tonnes that had made its maiden voyage, sailing first from Ireland, then Falmouth, England. The initial scent of fresh timber was quickly overwhelmed by the stench of sickly convicts crammed into the confined spaces of its lower decks. It had been a dangerous time to be sailing from England, as the Napoleonic Wars were in full swing. As a precaution, the ship was outfitted for defence, with swivel guns, which are small cannons, studded along its rails, and 30 barrels of gunpowder stored deep within its hold. On the 8th of December 1813, the 3Bs, along with the Catherine, which was also transporting convicts to Australia, left Falmouth in convoy with 2 armed frigates for protection. They parted company a month later when the armed vessels engaged in battle with a French ship. After an eventful journey, they had arrived in Port Jackson on the 6th of May 1814. 210 weary convicts disembarked, 55 of whom were immediately sent to the hospital displaying severe symptoms of scurvy. The remainder were assigned to settlers in Windsor, Liverpool and Parramatta. For the next 2 weeks, the ship bobbed gently in the harbour as officers worked diligently to organise cargo and prepare the vessel for its voyage to China. The 3Bs rested quietly among the busy harbour. As the sun crept higher in the sky, casting long golden beams across the water, a young boy attended an officer who was working in the hold. The darkened room had been lit up with the use of a candle and a lantern. When the officer had completed his task and was ready to leave, he instructed the boy to extinguish the flames. The boy took the candle snuff and with it cut the burning wick before hurriedly scampering up the stairs after the officer. Around 4:30 that afternoon, as the sun dipped lower, plumes of smoke began billowing from the 3Bs. The crew rushed to the scene but quickly backed off when they discovered the fire was out of control, licking the wall of the powder magazine. Within moments, the flames leapt out of the hatches and engulfed the masts. Unable to save the ship, they hastily unfastened the thick ropes that held it to the wharf. The ropes slithered away like snakes into the water as the ship pulled away from its moorings. As the sailors darted from the wharf, they shouted in alarm that the ship could blow at any second. The clamour rang throughout the harbour as tradesmen dropped their tools and made for the hills. Sydney-siders looked about in alarm, wondering what was happening. Rumours spread as rapidly as the fire, with the 30 barrels of gunpowder in the magazine somehow increasing to 130 barrels. Black smoke choked the sky as the ship's wooden bones, coated in tar and pitch, ignited with terrifying speed. As the southward wind pushed it further away from the government wharf, townspeople fell into a panic, scrambling to escape the line of fire from the loaded cannons on board. With the ship drifting on the tide, its potential targets shifted from other vessels in the harbour to nearby buildings and homes. no one was safe, as it would only take one powerful gust of wind to turn the ship. It remained dangerously close, threatening the complete destruction of the town. As the sun dipped down, many had fled for the countryside, leaving town as quickly as they could, while the townsfolk, whose homes and businesses lay within range, watched on anxiously. According to Elizabeth MacArthur, in a letter to her uncle, Governor Lachlan Macquarie had also packed up and left the potential danger. She wrote, quote, "The inhabitants of Sydney fled from their houses after the example of the governor," end quote. At 6:30, the burning vessel loomed near the northwest corner of the newly built Government Stores building, the lifeblood of the colony. Suddenly an ear-splitting blast shattered the quiet as the first cannon exploded, sending its fire over Mr. Blaxcell's newly built guardhouse, quickly followed by a thunderous volley from the other 13 cannons. The townsfolk dropped to the ground as swivel balls and grape shots whistled through the air. One ball shattered Captain Piper's parlour window, smashing it and its shutter to pieces before ploughing into his desk and dropping to the floor with a grim thud. Hearts pounding, the townspeople remained on the ground, bracing for the final explosion of the gunpowder barrels. But none came. Slowly, with great hesitation, they rose to their feet, astonished to see the ship still afloat. They watched nervously as it drifted towards the rocks, thick plumes of black smoke continuing to fill the air. The current then pulled her towards Bennelong Point, where she lodged on a bed of jagged rocks opposite Mr. Hook's stores. There the flames finally reached the powder magazine, triggering an explosion. To their surprise, it was not as huge or devastating as anticipated. Most of the ship had already burned out, its masts reduced to black stumps. Water had likely found its way to the powder. Cautiously, people rode out through the smoke to view what remained of the 3 Bs. Ash fell as they approached the burnt wreck, and they could hear timber crashing down as the ship collapsed in on itself. Residents watched as the wreck continued to burn throughout the night. The following morning, after a night of terror, people returned to Sydney. Life in the harbour resumed as though it had never happened, except for Captain Wallace and his crew. All their worldly belongings had gone up in flames with the ship. They were left completely destitute. A collection was soon organised, with Governor Lachlan Macquarie personally contributing £15. The exact cause of the fire remains unknown. It was widely assumed that the boy assisting the officer that morning had carelessly tossed the candle snuff, which landed on some oakum. The oakum likely smouldered for a few hours before eventually catching alight. Thank you for listening to the Convict Australia podcast. If you'd like to show your appreciation and get more involved, there are a number of ways you can. The first is by signing up to Convict Australia on Patreon, and you will get some perks like the Convict Australia Newsletter. Secondly, leave a review and tell your friends and family. This really does make a huge difference. And lastly, join the Facebook and Instagram group Convict Australia. All the links I've mentioned will be in the show notes. Thank you again. Till next time.